Hello, everyone, and welcome to Back at the Ranch. I'm Karl. Some of you guys know me as KF or simply just as Karl from Expedition Online Kilimanjaro season. I am co-hosting this season of Back at the Ranch with Jess. And tonight I have with me Haley, who was voted out unfortunately last night. Haley, I'm so upset to see you here with me tonight. I have to say, Haley, you were one of the players I had my eyes on because I saw the potential of you, but I also knew your game was the type of game that would flourish towards the second part of the game. And to see you leave without so early, I'm just so upset. But you know what? I can't be too biased, but let's bring it back in. Hi, Haley. How are you doing?
I know I am. It was so disappointing. It was so disappointing because it did feel like the turning point was coming and I just didn't get there.
No, I could sense it. I could sense it. That being said, I hope that your experience with us at Expedition Online has been a good one. What has been your general sense of your time with us on this game, on this season?
I enjoyed it so much. It was such a great experience to be a part of. It was very cool to meet all of these different people from all across like America and even Canada. And I loved doing the challenges in particular. I thought Jess did a great job with those. They were so much fun to just prepare for and do. And it was fun to just get to do that strategy. You don't get to do that in real life.
Yeah.
So it was like everything I could imagined besides it ending.
Now, do you find yourself still thinking about what you could have done last night to change the game? Or
Way too much.
Yeah. Well,
Way too much.
It's normal. That means that's a good sign, maybe. I don't know. And in fact, I can already tell you it's gonna happen months later. You'll be like, what if I had done that? So it's just
a little thought popping up every now and then.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, you were also lucky enough to be in one of our seasons that were like full length seasons where you actually were captained by two legends, Janet and Kelly Wentworth.
I should have mentioned that earlier too.
How was that? How was being picked by one of them? How was meeting them? How was talking to them?
The absolute best part of it. That's how I found out about this whole thing, is seeing people from Survivor talking about it. And just to actually get to meet them. And Janet's from where I'm from, in Florida, and I've always wanted to maybe run into her, and now to have the opportunity to actually kind of be playing for her, that's very so cool.
No, that's...
And they're both such legends that just to have some FaceTime with them is amazing.
I totally get it. I mean, I didn't get to have that many interactions as a mod, but the little tidbits of interactions I will relish forever. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I have a video. I have videos that she would send to us, saved onto my phone.
That's saving that, keeping that forever for sure. Yeah. All right, so then with that, let's jump right in. Let's jump right into the game. Day 0, Docs drops you guys in at base camp, and you guys start interacting with one another. How is that first couple of hours for you? How do you feel? Who do you want to talk to? Who do you not want to talk to? Maybe that's a little bit more interesting, but who do you get to talk to?
Yeah, it was so wild because they really just left all 18 of us on our own, and we were just okay, what do we do next? So we did all the regular introductions, which was nice. So we did get to hear from everybody initially, but then we did have to break apart. So when we saw all those rooms appear, I tried to pick the biggest one so that I could talk to the most amount of people, and that's when I got to meet people like Joshua and Troy and Neil. And then other people were popping in and out, like Philip and Mariana and Bridget. So it was very, very cool getting to meet those people, but it was very intimidating because I'm kind of a slow bloomer. So I had to make sure that I am talking and making sure I'm getting at least a little bit seen, but not too much, so that it's not a reason to be well, she didn't talk at all, so I'm gonna get rid of her. So I had to definitely figure out where I wanted to jump into the conversation just to make sure I stay a part of it.
No, it's definitely a difficult balance to achieve, right?
Mhm.
That being said, who were the people that stood out to you the most in these original conversations? Who were you like, oh, I'm definitely going to be working with this person, or I'm going to take a few steps back. This person is a little, scaring me a little bit.
Yeah, I had like all those first initial impressions from when we were talking as a big group, and then when we were talking in our smaller groups. So I remember like just immediately being like, okay, Karl is very interesting. He's having all these issues with technology and he's kind of wild. I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna mesh very well. And then I liked Joshua. We were playing for very similar charities. Um, and then I immediately liked Mike from the teacher perspective. So we're both teachers. And then it was like some people were giving me like they're here to play vibes, like Philip. I was getting those vibes from David. But in our smaller rooms, I remember I really did like Joshua, Neil, and Troy. But by the time we got into our parties, the only person I'd really talked to on the Janet side was Joshua.
Well, you just mentioned the parties. The docs came in at some point when you guys were still all together, and breaks the news that teams have been picked by the captains, and that you were picked by Janet. Um, how cool is that?
Cool. It's so cool.
Personally selected by Janet. I mean, come on. Come on. And then you guys break up into the two different parties to start the game. You guys even get to talk to Janet a little bit, and I hear that she gave you guys a little bit of an assignment, if I heard correctly. Well, not an assignment, maybe that's pushing it. She definitely gave you some names to
Yes.
watch out for. How did you feel about, like, what did you make of these two names?
Yes, she started off giving us some advice and some people to watch out for. So she did mention Philip, which, validated my concern. I was like, okay, Janet's on the same page as me. And then she was also saying Neil. And so immediately, as you're getting further and further, you're like, okay, I have to watch out for these people. That's what Janet said. Like, she got to see whatever it is that they said in their application videos. So I believe her. That's always in the back of your head.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, so that's basically how day 0 happened. Day 1, your party ends up winning the first challenge. So
Yeah,
pretty chill night. You guys
that was
get
a big
to
relief.
yeah, right. A lot of people see it as potentially like a night to just like get to know one another. I tend to see it as a way to test relationships. So I'm not too mad when if I see a team that I like lose, because they get to really test the waters to see like how much they can rely on the people they actually, like get a real vibe for the party that they're in.
Oh yeah.
To that point, what were your first vibes that night after basically now at this point about 24 hours of knowing these people? Like anything, like what were you feeling? Like, were you feeling comfortable in that group, or were you already seeing like, maybe some red flags raised here and there?
Yeah, it was definitely, it was nice to win, and I really enjoyed not having the potential to be the first one voted out, because that was what I was most worried about.
Yeah.
So we got into our group, and for a while it was all 9 of us talking, but eventually it did break down into smaller groups where you're seeing if you can make these relationships that maybe will last. So I get to talking to a few different people, and I know Danielle comes to me and several others and wants like a 5-person alliance with me, her, David, Mike, and Olivia. And I liked that because the day before I had underlined some names, and I had the same group of 5, except instead of Danielle, I had Joshua. So I was like, okay, something's brewing here. We can make this work. And we want a group of 5 out of 9. So it's good for when we do lose, because you want some sort of majority.
Yeah.
But even then, like by that point, I know that Karl had already called me quiet, which was what that big fear was coming in. I was like, oh no, he's gonna think about this forever. And other people, I don't think I was vibing as much with them on that night, but we were giving everyone kind of a chance to talk to each other.
Yeah, well, if you didn't get to test those relationships on day one, on day two, you guys lose
We certainly do.
the challenge, and it ends up being a unanimous vote. So you must feel good about that. Now, walk me through basically the strategy session there. Who came up with the name of Anthony, and was there a particular reason why you the party ended up voting for him, or and also the reason why you ended up going for that vote as well?
So I don't know who specifically said Anthony to start off, but there was beef that was happening between Anthony and Karl. So Anthony had been jumping around and telling everyone that Karl tried to start an alliance with him, and just kind of would just rush into rooms and then leave and just kind of mention that. So it was kind of just making everyone nervous, I think, and it didn't seem like he would be an easy person to work with that kind of like energy bouncing around. So I think it just started to become what everyone wanted, just to kind of chill our group out a little bit. But then the problem came was that we were trying to make Anthony feel like calm so that he wouldn't play his shot in the dark, because we didn't know how that was going to end up messing things up in the future at all those votes.
Yeah, at this point, you also are aware of two different twists in the game. So on day one, Katie is sent to Serrated Peak. So you guys are introduced to the concept of Serrated Peak. She comes back at the end of the night, before lights out. And you also, like you mentioned, Destiny's Token, which is an advantage in the game, a potential shot, like you said, shot out of the dark to stay in the game, if your name is being called out, if you're aware that your name is being called out. How did you feel about the different twists that we brought to the season?
It was interesting. I liked having, a potential chance to save myself if I felt the need. But it does add a whole other layer of strategy when you're worried that they could potentially land it right, guess the right number, and maybe like we have to revote suddenly and just pick someone, and you never know how that's going to go afterwards. So you have to be thinking from every single angle.
How about Serrated Peak? Did you think, what did you make of that? And were you at any point concerned with what Katie might and might not have gotten when she was over there?
Yeah, it was very strange, because when Katie came back, she was basically saying that nothing really happened. She said she was alone, which was untrue. She said she just got a video from Janet and really nothing else, and we're just like, okay. I don't feel like that's what this is about, just sitting alone all night. But eventually we do find out more about what happened.
And like the news starts to trickle. Okay. Now on day 3, you guys face your first big swap, another twist. I really hope we kept you guys on your toes this season.
You absolutely did.
Yeah, okay, great. That's what I want to hear.
100%. Every night I was like, what's gonna happen?
Great. I like to hear that. So so this is a really interesting swap, because you guys go from two parties and broken up into 3 smaller parties.
I was surprised by the 3 for sure.
Yeah. And so the danger also being that with smaller parties, it's really easy to get a majority so it's really easy to get things rolling. But you end up in a party where you have old Team Janet majority, so you must have somewhat of comfort there. How did you approach the swap, knowing that you were in the majority?
That did feel like such a huge relief. However, I don't think I'd ever actually spoken to David before, even though we were supposedly in the same alliance. But I don't think the 2 of us ever spoke, so that was worrisome. And then Katie, we already knew at that point, was a wild card. We never knew what was going to happen with her. So it was good that I knew that I could have them, but I also didn't know if I actually would.
Yeah, well, if you didn't talk to them before, you sure got to talk to them a lot, because you guys lose the first challenge, right? And you're going to Crossroad. You have the majority again, but Destiny's Token is at play.
It is.
And walk me through how you guys decided to approach the potential of that being played out.
So we did expect a Destiny's Token to be played, because if Bridget and Bill are realizing that obviously there's a majority of Team Janet, they're going to be worried that they're the ones going. So we were worried about them playing one of those. And so what me and David decided was that we would do 2 and 1. So Katie and I were going to vote Bill, and David was going to vote Bridget, so there'd maybe be like a 1-to-1 tie or some sort of majority if someone was safe. If they both lost their votes, whatever they ended up doing. But it didn't work out that way. It ended up being extremely crazy, in a way that I was not prepared for.
Yeah, no. Neither Bill nor Bridget play their token.
Bill did.
And the twist is Katie also plays hers.
Katie
You're right. Yes, Katie also plays hers, and it's basically a 1-1-1 basically. Yeah. And if Bill hadn't played his, one of y'all would have gone.
It could have been very different.
It would have been very different indeed. Was there at any point in your mind the possibility of maybe flipping on old Team Janet, or were you like, no, I have the majority in numbers, I want to keep it that way? Did you at any point consider bridge, jumping over? Or
yeah, I didn't want to flip on that night, because I'd rather keep the 3, but I was willing to in the future.
Okay.
But not that night.
Not that night particularly. Okay, yeah. All right. Now on day 4, you guys lose again. It's a double crossroads, so at least you're not the only ones going to crossroads. Exactly. Unfortunately, though, the only one team was exempt that night, and so you guys still have to vote for someone out. And you decide to vote for Bridget, so keeping old Team Janet strong. Now, at this point in the game, is there any talk about how many Team Kellys are left in the game, and how the Team Janet seems to be dominating the competition at this point? Because at this point, it's mostly there's a superiority in numbers for Team Janet. So what's the thought process at this point in the game?
Oh yeah, I was definitely thinking that. And I mean, that's something we like up until a point. But whatever it is that keeps you safe is where I was at. So I was willing to change it up, because it would have still been a Team Janet majority, even if we had switched it up at that point.
It's also interesting because at this point in the game too, you and David, as well as Katie, are the former Team Janets that have spent the least amount of time with other Team Janet members. So that's why I'm asking, when does it start running in your mind, okay, I'm gonna need more Team Kellys in the game, because, or some Team Kellys left in the game in order to have my back. Because I'm probably gonna need it to help me stay beat the other side of the Janets, because you'll have as much time with Kellys as you did with these Janets.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I know, looking back at it, it was such a good initial position to be in, but it does feel almost like being swap screwed, because I did stick with the same people for so long. So that night when we did lose, when there was just 4 of us, I did talk to David about potentially voting for Katie instead of Bridget. That was something I was willing to do, but he did not seem open to it, and it could have been a 2-2 tie, but I didn't feel like.
Well, we'll get to that, the Katie and David of it all, in a little bit, but so much to unpack there, right?
There really is.
But the next day, you get another swap, but you end up staying both with David and Katie, but you have added to that Bambi, Philip, and Mike. So this is a new team, but then Docs throws in another surprise, another twist, and it's not just 2 parties competing, there's a third party full of returning players. What's your reaction there?
Oh my gosh, it felt like I should have seen it coming, but I was so blown away. And I was very nervous for however someone was going to get back into the game, how they were going to feel, because I'd voted out, 3 of them.
Well, yeah, and so they potentially had 2 people possibly coming back in, and you guys still have to vote someone else out if you lost. Luckily for you, you end up winning, so you don't have to vote anyone, and they only have to send, they come in second, so they only get to vote 1 person back into the game. Is there anyone specifically at this point you want to see out of all the returning players come back in the game?
Not particularly. I probably didn't want to see the people I voted out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, obviously,
because that was a little bit more personal than Anthony was.
So you were more like, it's not so much so who you wanted to see come back, it was more who you did not want to see come back. Yes. And that totally makes sense. And with that person joining the other party, that would also give you some time to figure out how you would approach that person as well. So the next round is a tricky one, because you guys lose the challenge, but there's a lot of talk in your party about the player that is going to be voted for on that round not necessarily being voted out.
Yes.
And so you guys choose to go for Philip, knowing that he may very well be given an advantage, or if I believe you guys thought he would be voted into the other party or something. Why was the choice to go for Philip in that scenario? Was he someone that you actually kind of trusted, or was it like you don't trust him at all, you'd rather just push him aside for the time being?
So it was between Philip and Bambi that night, because again, it was a kind of Janet versus Kelly majority, but I wanted to vote out Bambi, and that's who I did vote for that night. And that's because I thought I wanted to keep Philip with us, because I was thinking, just keep your friends close but your enemies closer, and I thought it would be better to have an eye on him than to send him elsewhere, especially because I'd heard that he was close with Mariana, and I'd rather keep them separated. And I figured that it wouldn't really hurt Bambi. Like, I didn't think if that's what was going to happen, her going on to the other party. So that's who I voted for, and that's what I thought was happening. But even I told Katie, I was like, we don't think they're going home. It's really just a coin flip. But what was the real problem was that it ended up being the Serrated Peak instead.
Yeah. And he was sent to Serrated Peak, and he ended up getting an advantage, or that he got, which was more of a disadvantage, that he would get to choose who would get the disadvantage, right? And so on the next round, you guys win, so you don't have to worry about it. I noticed that night there was a lot of team building, right? At least, especially between you, Mike, and David, really like consolidating, like deciding how you guys would work together moving forward, maybe bringing in Bambi in as well a little bit more. And that's perfectly exactly what you would want, some peace and quiet right before the rendezvous, because the next night rendezvous happens, and things things get really, really interesting at this point. Now, on the first challenge after rendezvous, Joshua ends up winning, and the vote is for Philip. Now, you just said that you weren't necessarily entirely trusting of Philip. So were you happy to see Philip go? You ended up voting yourself for Philip. So was that something you wanted to do, or is that something that you figured you would just go with the numbers at that point?
So at that point, I was willing for it to not be Philip, because I really did think that he had a compass that he could use to save himself. So I was very worried about that. So I was ready to throw like Karl out at that point. But it did seem like people were really, really, really landing on Philip. So I was like, okay, this is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, well, it ended up being not a very straightforward night either, because David's name comes up 3 times also in the votes. And your name also comes up once. We'll get to yours right after my next question. But first, I want to talk about the theatrics of that night, right? So first of all, you have David and Katie talk about a compass so
Mhm.
to save David. Were you aware that Katie had a compass and that David had taken possession of that compass at that point?
I had heard that night when we were strategizing that David had a compass that he was given to by
Okay.
Katie, but not all the theatrics that came with it.
Okay, okay. And did you feel any certain type of way that the fact that you were not looped into that vote, or like was there anything particularly like did you have any what was your reaction to finding out about this?
Oh yeah, I was shocked. I was like, when did this all happen? When did they talk about this? And then I didn't realize also how worried David did feel that
Mm-hmm.
night, and how close it did end up being.
Okay. Yeah, it was very close indeed. Now, who do you think voted for you that night?
So when we went back to camp, I was a little fired up about it, and I was just like, anyone want to come clean about that? I'd really love to know. And it did end up being Bambi that voted for me. And she
Okay.
said it was more of like a throwaway vote because I don't think she wanted to vote for Philip. Maybe trying to keep that open as a possibility if he were to stay,
Okay.
and
Did you
hoping that
did you believe her when she said that?
um I don't think she was targeting me, but it
Anytime your
did.
name comes up is
Yeah, it did. It was just strange because at that point we were people who had bonded,
Yeah.
and maybe she was just like, okay, well, we know each other. And I did vote for her once, and we had to talk about that. I
Hmm.
was like, I was not trying to get you out. I didn't think anyone was going home, and no one did. Um, but it was something that kind of stuck in the
Yeah,
back of my
yeah,
mind.
understandably so. Because I mean, especially in a chaotic night like that, when
Yeah.
anything could have happened, the fact that your name came up at all, I totally get that.
Hmm.
Now, on the next night, you end up winning, right? So you must have been super happy. How did you feel about winning a challenge, an individual
Oh,
challenge?
that was so awesome. I had not been great at these challenges. They you never know. Every night was so different with what we had to do. But I did feel really, really great about winning one and being safe for a night.
Yeah. Um, but at the same time, I feel like it's also like a bittersweet night because this is when the game begins its pattern of getting rid
Mhm.
of players who are associated with a duo or a trio.
Yep.
And this night, even though it's your night, one of your closest ally gets voted out that night, right? And
Yeah.
so for you, uh, how was it frustrating to see how quickly the tides had turned on Katie and how basically it had become a unanimous vote to get rid of one of your closest allies on the night that you had won it exemption and that where you should have felt you had a little bit more power, you were kind of
Yeah.
like rendered a little powerless in a way, no?
Yeah, it was so strange because I feel like we there was such bad energy with David and Katie um there, but like also people didn't want to vote Katie out, but it ended up being Katie, but everyone felt really bad about it. No one wanted to see her go at that point. Um but it just kind of snowballed, and
Mm-hmm.
it just became such a strong vote that happened,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Um, at that point in the game, were you like, so were you okay by the end of the night? Were you okay with losing that her as an ally in the game, or were you kind of like you felt like, okay, tomorrow I got to like regroup? Either like I have to lay down the groundwork for me moving forward because I've just lost someone so close to me.
Yeah, it was interesting because even with Rendezvous, I hadn't really talked to her individually. She's such a hard person to predict because
Mm-hmm.
she does feel very, very loyal to people, but um even when you think a plan's going to happen, like when we had the three-way vote, it doesn't work out that way. So it's hard to know what she will do. So
Yeah.
it's also nice to have maybe more of a straightforward plan of action.
Yeah. I can definitely see how it's hard to navigate that unpredictability. So that's that. I get that. That makes sense. This unfortunately leads us to the night where you were voted out. Your closest ally wins the individual exemption, and you're the one targeted. Now, at this point, from 1 to 10, how shocking was this turn of events to you? Like, did you had the slightest hint that it was coming?
It was like a 15. Okay, I was like, I was getting nervous that it wasn't going to go the way I wanted it to go. However, I did not think it was going to be me. I thought I might end up in some sort of minority, and I did, but I had no idea that it was going to be me.
Are you aware of who was part of the plan? Because the other name called out that night was Joshua. Who was supposed to vote with you for Joshua that night and did not end up voting with you and ended up voting for you instead? So, are you aware of the like? Who do you think? Like, are you aware of how the vote broke down, or like, do you have an idea of how it broke down?
Yeah, I have an idea of it. So David and I jumped into a room together, and we were like, okay, we want something to happen. So we talked about gathering a group of five, in order to vote Joshua out. And then he didn't want to include Mike because he was worried about how close Mike was with Joshua and Karl. But he wanted it to be me, like Bambi, Mariana, and Danielle and him, I think. And I was like, if you don't want Mike to know, we cannot tell Bambi. Like all that Bambi's been saying to me every single vote is that she is team Mike. Like this is a bad pairing there. And so that's what we want to happen. And I go around talking to people, and Mariana and Bambi are always really easy people to say that we're going to get out that night. So that's what I'm throwing out to people that aren't in on the plan. And then Mike talks to me, and he's telling me that he heard that we were worried about his closeness with Joshua and Karl, and he doesn't want Joshua to go because Joshua has half a compass that he could potentially use with his half a compass. I'm like, but if we vote Joshua out with that half a compass, we might see that half a compass come back in where we could use it. Yeah. Like, let's get him away instead. But then he also says something to me that, red flag, where he's talking about not voting David and I out yet. He like says that yet. And I was like, Mike, yet? Like, come on, dude, that hurts. And but I'm thinking the same thing. I was worried about Mike for like 2 rounds because he did seem to be friends with everybody. But then it feels like the plan's in motion. I've talked to most people who I've needed to talk to except for Danielle. So I'm trying to get into a room with Danielle, but she keeps talking to people. So then I'm not talking to people as much. And looking back on that, that was a fatal flaw. Because apparently word's going around that perhaps I have a compass, which I was upset about because I was trying very hard to clear the air with who could possibly have a compass. Because the night before, after Philip's vote, he gave the clue that was in the clue room that night. And I had written down the 4 people I saw in the clue room. And so I talked to the 3 others, and they all claimed not to have it. But I did find the compass, but it was too late. And so I'm telling people that, which apparently was not a good plan, because then they thought I had it. But I was trying to show that who would have it, because that night I saw the clue room pop up, and I didn't go into it because I was talking to Joshua, and I did not want Joshua to go into it because he already had half a compass. So I kept talking to him, and I didn't want to disappear somewhere so that he'd be suspicious of anything. And it didn't work.
It's so much to keep track of also, and it's amazing how you guys were also diligent on taking your notes and keeping an eye on all these things. When I played, I was not that tidy of a player,
Oh,
that's
no.
for sure.
Felt
Or
like I
that
was in school
observant of a
sometimes.
player. But no, but yeah, so at the end of the night, you end up being voted out. Unfortunately, that brought you to the end of your expedition.
Yeah.
But you truly were a delight to watch play. You were always
Thank you.
calm and collected. And like I said, I could see basically like the momentum, like you just needed maybe like 1 or 2 days and you would have
Yes.
like, I think you could have gone very far into the game. That being said, at this point left in the game, who are the people you want to see do very well, and who are the people that you think will be doing well moving forward in the game?
So of course I gotta root for my person David. But you know, after having me go out, who knows what's next for him. Um, and then I always like Mike. He put himself in a good position. In order to continue, even though I was very worried about him, but that makes him a good person to stick around for me to vote
So
for later on.
are you rooting strictly for Team Janet at this point in the game?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
pretty
Good.
pretty much. And it's not necessarily specifically because they're Team Janet, but it is most of
You've
the people I've
interacted
gotten
with.
to spend
Yeah.
time with
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
seen their game.
What has been your favorite part of playing the game so far? What has been your highlight and your low light?
Yeah, I think my high is just being able to get to play a game like this. Like, I feel like for me
The whole
going
thing.
yeah, the whole thing. I know, right? A cop out. But I've loved Survivor forever, and so to be able to kind of put that strategy at work was awesome. So for me, like, in the end, it wasn't really about winning or losing. I was just sad that my time got cut off. I just wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
And then I had to, I have to stop. So that and meeting everyone was awesome, and all the things that everyone put to good work to make this happen. And then my low, being voted out was kind of except it was pretty cool that it was a blind side,
Yeah.
that's
You went like
cool
you
way
went
to
out
go
like a
out.
G. That's what
Yeah,
that's...
exactly. So it's a cool way to go out. And then just being in positions where you're having to depend on this short time period to get to talk to people in these specific rooms it was hard to get in the right place, which was tricky.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. That being said, the other question along the same lines that I have for you is, was this your first time playing a game like this? And
yeah, I had no idea that these things
so
existed.
what well, welcome to the community.
Good to be here.
My season was also my first time playing, and I feel like I found my people, so welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have now any takeaways for the way you're going to be playing the game moving forward, if you ever get a chance to play again, or if you ever get to go on that show that we all love, right? Like, what is it that you learned about yourself and about the way you approach the game that you think you'll be able to utilize in the future?
Yeah, I think just being a little bit more on the offensive. Like, there's a fine line of where you go too far when you're trying to get your way, your plan. But trying to push people a little bit further for what I want to happen. Because there's a lot of things where when I'm doing my whole mind look back at everything, where I'm like, if I had gotten my way there, we all would have been in a better, in a better position. So just pushing a little bit, but I feel like for a lot of it, I did a better job than I thought of, like, coming out of my shell, and just even more.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely be happy with the way you played the game. I don't think you ruffled any feathers, and like I said, I think it was just a true delight to watch you play. You bring the calmness and the confidence that I aspire to as a player who tends to be a little chaotic. So I praise you for it, because these games breed paranoia, and for you to play the game that you did despite the paranoia, I think is very commendable. It was a real pleasure to watch you to watch you play, honestly. Also, it was very nice of you to spend your night with me, talking to me. I'm super thankful. Thanks for coming back at the wrench with me, and I wish you the best of luck, and I really hope I get to see you again.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. It
All
was
right.
great talking to you.
Yeah. So for everyone else, bye.